The winter of 1966 in Portland, Oregon, was particularly harsh. Snow blanketed the streets, frost edged the windows, and a biting wind cut through the narrow alleys of the residential neighborhoods. Yet, for the Thompson family, the storm outside was nothing compared to the silence within their modest home. Behind the closed doors of 47 Elm Street, something terrible had begun years earlier. A darkness no one could have imagined. Emma and Lilli Thompson, 7 and 8 years old, were identical in appearance and inseparable in spirit. Neighbors often remarked how the girls laughed in perfect harmony, chasing each other in the yard or racing to school together. Their mother, Ruth Thompson, had passed away when they were infants, leaving their father, Harold Thompson, to raise them. On the surface, he appeared devoted, a stern yet attentive man, seen walking his daughters to school, buying ice cream on summer evenings, attending parent-teacher meetings, and maintaining the house meticulously. Friends and neighbors described Harold as quiet, reserved, but dependable, the kind of man who never drew attention to himself. Yet, beneath this veneer, a darkness had been festering, one that no one suspected, not even the closest of friends. March 12, 1966, began like any other Saturday. Emma and Lilli had dressed themselves in matching sweaters and coats, ready to spend the morning with Harold before a planned trip to the local library. By all appearances, the day promised warmth, learning, and laughter. But when the girls left their bedrooms, something was different. Harold led them downstairs into the basement under the pretense of a special surprise. The basement, usually used for storage and laundry, was transformed into a locked enclosure. The heavy door bolted from the inside, windows covered, and no way out. Once the girls were inside, Harold left, claiming he needed to run errands. Neighbors would later recall noticing a strange silence around the Thompson home. For a few days, the girls' absence went unnoticed by the world, as Harold continued his public façade, attending church, visiting the grocery store, and interacting with neighbors in the same polite, composed manner. But inside, Emma and Lilli were trapped. For the next several years, they were confined to a dark basement room, receiving minimal care, little food, and only the attention necessary to sustain them, just enough to survive for a time. Harold's calculated cruelty was hidden beneath the guise of normalcy. Each year, neighbors would see him hosting family gatherings, volunteering at the local church, and exchanging pleasantries with other parents. Emma and Lilli's disappearance, initially reported as a mystery when friends asked why they were absent from school, was subtly deflected by Harold with stories of relatives moving away, boarding schools, or extended trips. The community accepted these explanations because Harold had always been regarded as trustworthy. He was a pillar of the neighborhood, a man beyond suspicion. As the years passed, whispers began to circulate about the Thompson twins, though nothing concrete emerged. School records showed them withdrawn from classes. Neighbors noted the girls had moved away, and the authorities initially closed the case after months of unfruitful searches. Life went on, or, at least, it appeared to. Harold's careful planning ensured that no one suspected the truth. His daughters remained locked in the basement, slowly succumbing to hunger, injuries, and neglect. By the early 1970s, Harold had established a new family life in the same neighborhood, his façade unshakable. The basement remained a hidden prison beneath his home, the twins' cries muffled, their existence nearly erased from the world. The psychological manipulation, combined with physical confinement, ensured that Emma and Lilli had no means of escape. Each day, Harold maintained routines that simulated normal life on the surface. Church, shopping, conversations with neighbors. Yet below the floorboards, the sisters' lives grew ever more precarious. Fast forward to 2010, a retired police officer, now volunteering at the Oregon State Cold Case Unit, began reviewing unsolved child disappearances in Portland from the 1960s, the Thompson case. Noted for the girl's young age and mysterious disappearance, caught his attention. There were inconsistencies in Harold's statements, minor details that had been overlooked decades earlier. He noticed patterns that had never been fully investigated and began quietly reopening files. The officer's intuition was clear. Something about this case did not add up. Meanwhile, technological advancements in forensic science, particularly in DNA analysis, made it possible to re-examine decades-old evidence. Investigators realized that even minimal biological traces, previously considered unusable, could now yield definitive results. With renewed determination, the Cold Case Unit requested all surviving evidence, documents and photographs related to the Thompson twins' disappearance. They reconstructed timelines, interviewed elderly neighbors, and gathered every shred of material that might shed light on what had happened. By 2015, investigators began noticing anomalies in Harold's history. For one, he had no records of the twins after their disappearance. Financial records hinted at unusual expenditures in the house structural renovations that, when examined, could have concealed a hidden space. Witness accounts suggested that Harold had once boasted about keeping secrets in a way that, in hindsight, sounded ominous. The pieces were scattered, but they formed a disturbing mosaic. Then came the breakthrough. A neighbor, now elderly, recalled seeing Harold carrying unusually large containers into the basement, often at odd hours. The neighbor's memory, previously dismissed, prompted authorities to seek permission for a forensic inspection of the property. In 2018, search warrants were issued. Excavation teams and forensic specialists descended on the Thompson residence, carefully scanning every inch of the home, looking for hidden spaces that might hold answers to a decades-old tragedy. In the basement, investigators discovered a hidden door, cleverly disguised with shelving and paint that matched the walls. Beyond it lay a room containing the skeletal remains of two children, intertwined in a way that suggested they had died close together. Forensic analysis confirmed the identities. Emma and Lilli Thompson, twin sisters lost to the world for more than 50 years. The cause of death, severe malnutrition and untreated injuries, consistent with years of confinement and neglect. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. The man once admired as a devoted father, a reliable neighbor, and a pillar of Portland society was unmasked as the architect of an unimaginable crime. Authorities moved quickly to arrest Harold Thompson, now 78 years old, charging him posthumously with the murder of his own children. The courtroom, when it convened, was filled with journalists, law enforcement officers, and neighbors, many of whom had known Harold for decades without ever suspecting the horror beneath his calm exterior. Detective Sarah Lawson, the lead investigator, reflected on the enormity of the case. This was someone who lived a double life for decades, she said. The evil was hidden in plain sight, and it took the persistence of modern forensic science and cold case investigation to finally uncover the truth. The community is grappling with both the horror of what he did and the betrayal of the trust he cultivated for so many years. As the investigation continued, families and community members began grappling with the story of Emma and Lilli, to young lives stolen, forgotten, and only now remembered. The trial would reveal the full extent of Harold's planning, deception, and the psychological manipulation that allowed him to evade suspicion for so long. But one thing was clear: the twins would finally be acknowledged, their story would be told, and justice, though delayed by decades, would be pursued. Before we continue, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Your support helps us bring these long-forgotten cold cases into the light, giving families justice and closure they've waited decades for. The discovery of Emma and Lilli Thompson's remains sent immediate shockwaves through the Portland community. Neighbors who had once waved at Harold Thompson in passing now wrestled with the realization that the man they had admired, respected, and trusted for decades was capable of unimaginable cruelty. Yet, the case was far from closed. The question that haunted every investigator, every family member, and every journalist covering the story was the same. How could a father keep his own daughters imprisoned for years? And how had no one noticed? Detective Sarah Lawson, assigned to the case, recalled the first time she stepped into the Thompson basement. "I knew immediately this wasn't just neglect. This was a calculated, intentional act of confinement. The way the room was built, the way every shelf and panel was concealed, it was designed to hide these children from the world." The level of premeditation was staggering. Forensic teams worked meticulously, documenting every inch of the basement. Broken toys, faded clothing, and scattered drawings offered chilling glimpses into Emma and Lilli's last years. Specialists analyzed the skeletal remains to determine age at death, nutritional deficiencies, and evidence of trauma. It became apparent that the twins had suffered from chronic malnutrition and untreated injuries, some likely inflicted intentionally. The combination of starvation and wounds over time ultimately led to their deaths. Law enforcement quickly moved to review Harold Thompson's history. Financial records, once unremarkable, revealed unusual spending patterns. Money had been used to build hidden compartments, reinforce the basement walls, and create barriers that would prevent easy detection. Interviews with former neighbors and acquaintances painted a portrait of a man obsessed with control, who meticulously curated his public image while hiding a grotesque secret. Detective Lawson also discovered something chilling about the psychological manipulation Harold had exercised over his daughters. The notes found in the basement included brief messages, written in a shaky hand, presumably by Harold, instructing the girls to remain quiet, to behave, and to stay hidden for safety. It became clear that Harold had convinced his children that the outside world was dangerous, that he alone could protect them, and that disobedience would bring dire consequences. Emma and Lilli, trusting their father implicitly, had been trapped not only physically but psychologically. The investigation turned to modern technology. Although the crime had occurred over 50 years earlier, DNA testing and forensic genealogy allowed investigators to confirm the identities of the twins. Genetic material from the remains was matched with distant relatives who had submitted DNA for ancestry research. These matches provided definitive proof that the girls were indeed Emma and Lilli Thompson, and that Harold Thompson was their father, and now their killer. Local law enforcement coordinated with federal authorities to prepare for Harold's arrest. At 78, Harold was still physically capable, though his health had declined over the decades. Officers approached the situation with extreme caution, knowing the potential for public backlash, media frenzy, and the complexity of dealing with a perpetrator who had evaded suspicion for so long. On the morning of the arrest, Portland police surrounded Harold Thompson's home quietly, choosing to minimize public attention until the operation was underway. Inside, Harold was performing the same morning rituals he had maintained for decades, making coffee, reading the newspaper, and going through his mail. When the officers knocked at the door and announced themselves, Harold reportedly froze, staring at them with a mix of resignation and disbelief. "You have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the deaths of your daughters, Emma and Lilli Thompson," one officer announced. Harold said nothing, only nodded slightly, his face betraying no emotion. He was handcuffed and escorted to a waiting vehicle. Still eerily composed despite the gravity of the situation, the community reaction was immediate. Neighbors who had once waved, smiled, and chatted with Harold now faced the incomprehensible truth. "I never would have suspected him," said Margaret Lanning, who had lived across the street from the Thompsons for decades. "He was so polite, so normal. It's terrifying to realize someone can hide such evil right under our noses." Local media flooded the streets, capturing interviews, reactions, and commentary from both authorities and neighbors. Psychologists were brought in to help the community process the magnitude of the crime and the betrayal they had all endured. During preliminary hearings, details of the case shocked everyone involved. Investigators revealed the timeline. Harold had confined Emma and Lilli in the basement for 6 years, providing minimal sustenance and ignoring their injuries. Each year, he maintained an appearance of normalcy in public, hosting holiday gatherings, participating in local events, and maintaining the façade of a devoted father who had lost his daughters. It became clear that Harold's careful planning, combined with his knowledge of human psychology, had allowed him to manipulate the perceptions of every neighbor, friend, and family member around him. One of the most haunting revelations came from the analysis of the basement itself. Experts noted that Harold had constructed the hidden room with multiple layers of concealment, false walls, disguised panels, and sound. Any normal inspection would have failed to uncover the room, and the minimal food and water provided to the girls ensured they could survive for a while without drawing attention, though ultimately it led to their tragic deaths. The trial preparations began, with prosecutors emphasizing the sheer audacity and meticulous planning of Harold's crimes. They described him as someone who had manipulated, deceived, and concealed evidence for decades, exploiting the trust of a community that had admired him. Defense attorneys attempted to frame the situation as negligence rather than intentional harm, but the evidence, including DNA, skeletal analysis, hidden writings, and financial records, painted a damning picture. The community began to grapple with the duality of Harold Thompson's existence. The same man who had been admired as a good neighbor, a churchgoer, and a reliable member of society was now revealed as a perpetrator of unimaginable cruelty. Psychologists explained the phenomenon. The human mind often clings to familiar narratives, even in the face of subtle evidence to the contrary. Harold had exploited this bias perfectly, creating a life that masked the horrors he inflicted on his own children. Detective Lawson reflected on the case. It's rare to see someone maintain such a meticulous cover for so long, but it also shows the power of persistence, modern forensic science, and human intuition. We didn't give up on Emma and Lilli, and now, more than 50 years later, their story has finally been told, and their father is being held accountable, as Harold's arrest made headlines. Many in Portland struggled with grief, disbelief, and outrage. Memorials for Emma and Lilli appeared in front of the Thompson home and at local schools. Residents lit candles, left flowers, and wrote notes remembering the girls as vibrant, loving children who deserved to grow up, dream, and laugh in the sunlight. The case also prompted a broader conversation about child welfare, community vigilance, and the importance of forensic science in solving cold cases. Social workers, educators, and law enforcement officers used the Thompson case to train future generations in recognizing subtle signs of abuse and neglect, emphasizing that even the most respected individuals may harbor dark secrets. While the legal process continued, the community collectively mourned the lives lost and celebrated the long overdue uncovering of truth. Emma and Lilli, once hidden and forgotten, became symbols of perseverance, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the power of modern investigative techniques. Even decades later, Detective Lawson noted that the emotional impact of the case remained profound. Every time I walk past the basement, I think of Emma and Lilli, their laughter, their innocence. The crime was horrific, but the truth matters. It always matters. And today, for the first time in 50 years, it does. The courtroom in Portland was unlike any the community had seen in decades. Reporters, former neighbors, social workers, and law enforcement officers from across the state filled every available seat. The air was thick with anticipation, grief, and disbelief. For over 50 years, Harold Thompson had hidden behind a carefully crafted life, one that masked unspeakable horrors. Today, he would face the consequences. At 78, Harold appeared small and frail in the orange jumpsuit, his once imposing presence reduced by age and years of evasion. Yet, his eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed the cunning that had allowed him to maintain his secret for so long. He remained composed as the judge called the court to order, scanning the room with a clinical detachment that made even seasoned officers uneasy. Prosecutor Angela Martinez opened the case with a chilling recounting of the events. She described in painstaking detail the confinement of Emma and Lilli in the basement, the deprivation, the psychological manipulation, and the tragic deaths. The evidence was overwhelming. Skeletal remains confirmed by DNA, skeletal and nutritional analyses indicating chronic malnourishment, hidden writings revealing instructions and threats, and financial records showing deliberate concealment of the basement modifications. Witnesses took the stand, sharing memories of the Thompson family and the public persona Harold had maintained. Neighbors spoke of holiday gatherings, smiling children, and a seemingly doting father. Former co-workers described his professional demeanor, reliability, and involvement in local civic projects. Every testimony painted the stark contrast between the public man and the private monster. One of the most emotional moments came when a forensic psychologist, Dr. Elaine Chambers, testified about the psychological impact on the children and the manipulative behavior of Harold Thompson. He used the bond of trust, the fundamental relationship between father and child, as a weapon, she explained. He convinced them that the outside world was dangerous, that obedience was safety, and that he alone could control their fate. It's a level of psychological control rarely documented, and it makes the crime even more heinous. Family members of the victims, distant relatives who had waited decades for answers, were allowed to speak. Their words carried the weight of 50 years of unanswered questions, grief, and injustice. "We never stopped hoping someone would find the truth," said Margaret Thompson, a cousin who had spent years advocating for the case to be reopened. "Emma and Lilli deserve more than this world gave them, but we finally have a measure of justice. Their story will not be forgotten." Harold's defense attempted to frame the deaths as accidental or due to neglect rather than intentional harm, citing his advanced age and claimed mental strain. Yet, the evidence was irrefutable. Every document, every forensic analysis, every corroborated neighbor testimony pointed to deliberate, sustained cruelty. The jury, after days of testimony and review, had little room for doubt. During closing arguments, the prosecutor's voice shook with both outrage and sorrow. For over 50 years, Harold Thompson lived freely, hiding in plain sight while the girls he swore to protect suffered and died. Martinez said, "The community was deceived. Friends, neighbors, colleagues, all of us were deceived. Today, we correct that deception. Today, we honor Emma and Lilli by holding their father accountable." As the jury deliberated, the courtroom held its collective breath. When the verdict was finally announced guilty on multiple counts, including first-degree murder and child abuse, the room erupted in a mixture of relief, sobs, and muted applause. Justice, long delayed, had been served. Harold Thompson would spend the remainder of his life in prison, unable to harm anyone else, unable to hide from the truth. The sentencing hearing that followed allowed the community and the surviving family members to voice their final thoughts. Margaret Thompson read a prepared statement, tears streaming down her face. "To the man who took Emma and Lilli from us, you stole their lives, their laughter, and their future. For over 50 years, we carried the pain of their absence. Today, we carry the knowledge that the truth is finally known, and you will answer for every moment of suffering you inflicted. Rest in prison, knowing the world finally sees you for what you are." Harold Thompson, seated and restrained, remained silent as the words were read, his expression unreadable. At the end, he was led away, escorted past memorials that had been established for the twins. Reminders of innocence lost and lives cut tragically short in the weeks following the trial. Portland reflected on the case, the hidden dangers within seemingly ordinary families, and the advances in forensic science that had finally uncovered the truth. The case sparked community programs focused on child safety, advocacy for missing children, and the importance of never letting a case go cold. Social workers and law enforcement officers cited Emma and Lilli's story in training seminars, emphasizing vigilance, awareness, and the importance of listening to the often overlooked signs of abuse. The Thompson case also demonstrated the extraordinary power of modern forensic genealogy, archival research, and persistent detective work. Techniques that had been unavailable in 1966, when the girls disappeared, finally gave them their voice and their story. It was a testament to the relentless dedication of investigators, forensic scientists, and community advocates who refused to let decades of silence continue. Emma and Lilli's legacy endured beyond the tragedy. Memorials, scholarships in their names, and educational programs for children emphasized resilience, awareness, and hope. Parents, children, and neighbors who had once unknowingly interacted with Harold Thompson could now reflect on the importance of vigilance and community accountability. Detective Lawson, reflecting on the conclusion of the case, said, "Cases like Emma and Lilli's remind us that even in the darkest situations, truth eventually comes to light. It may take decades, it may test our patience, but justice has a way of finding its path. Theirs is a story of sorrow, but also of perseverance, courage, and the unwavering belief that no child should be forgotten." In the end, the Oregon 1966 cold case became more than a story of horror. It became a lesson in human resilience, the power of forensic science, and the necessity of community vigilance. Emma and Lilli, though lost far too soon, finally had their voices heard, their names cleared, and their story told for the world to remember. For viewers watching, the case of Emma and Lilli Thompson is a stark reminder that justice, no matter how delayed, can still prevail. It teaches vigilance, compassion, and the unyielding commitment of those who refuse to let victims be forgotten. Their story, while tragic, now inspires action, awareness, and hope for all future generations.